Hello and welcome to the United States Constitution. Today we're going to be looking at the overall organization of the United States Constitution using this handout. All right, as you can see, the original United States Constitution, which was written in 1787, went into effect in 1789, and it has 7 original articles. Article 1, which is the longest and most in-depth article, deals with the legislative branch. We should know that Congress has the authority to make the laws. That's what the legislature does. Congress is made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives. That makes us a bicameral Congress. And it goes on then to identify the basic powers and some of the procedures that goes on in Congress. Article 2 is the executive branch. Article 2 is the executive branch, and it says the executive authority of the national government rests in the office of the president and the vice president. And then it goes on to identify the brief provisions of presidential power. And we already know that the executive branch is responsible for enforcing the nation's laws. Article 3 is the judicial branch. And the judicial powers of the United States rest in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as created by Congress. Federal judges are appointed for a period of, quote, during good behavior, which basically means for life. And also in Article 3, we get the very definition of treason. You will have to know which article belongs to which branch, and this is pretty easy for us to remember. We always think of the legislative branch making the laws first, then the executive branch enforcing the laws second, and then the judicial branch interpreting the laws third. So we always go with Article 1, 2, 3, legislative, executive, judicial. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense and you'll be able to remember what that means. When we get into Article 4, Article 4 deals with interstate relations. So here we are talking states. Article 4 says that states must honor one another's laws, records, and court rulings. It says that citizens must be protected and that Congress establishes the statehood process. Article 4 establishes one of my favorite F words in government, the federal system of government. That is to say, we have a government where we have a national level that takes care of national concerns and a state level that takes care of state and local concerns. We can remember that Article 4 is federalism because the number 4 begins with the letter F, and federalism begins with the letter F. So F and F, 4 and federalism. The next article is Article 5. Article 5 deals with amending the Constitution. An amendment is a formal change to the original Constitution itself, and this was a genius element of the U.S. Constitution. It outlines the process for making these formal changes to the Constitution, which we'll be looking at a little bit later. I always remember that Article 5 is the amendment process because a V for 5 looks like an upside down A for amendment. So once again here we've got 5 amendment. All right, hopefully that'll be easy for you guys to remember. Article 6 deals with national debts and federal supremacy. It says that all debts will be paid by the United States government, so that guarantees that no matter how much we go into a debt, we will pay off those debts. The U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That means it is above all other laws, and federal laws are above the state laws. Federal and state officials owe their first loyalty, their original loyalty, to the U.S. Constitution. Their very oaths of office pledge to support the supremacy of the United States. I always remember that Article 6 begins with the letter S, and so does the word supreme. 6 supreme. 6 is supreme. The final article, Article 7, deals with the ratification process of the Constitution. After all, it wasn't enough just to write it down, it also had to be ratified. According to the U.S. Constitution, in order for it to take effect, it must be ratified by 9 out of the original 13 states. So this is about a 3/4 majority. They knew they would never have all 13 states agree to this. However, they did know that they could get 9 out of the 13, and they figured that was close enough to get this party started. So this is the basic organization of the original United States Constitution. And now we're going to turn our attention to the 27 amendments to the United States Constitution. That's right, we have made 27 additions to the original document that is the United States Constitution. Now, if we take a look at the first 10, I'm not going to ask you guys to memorize these quite yet. However, we need to know that the first 10 have several things that are really, really important in common. For one, they were all added at the exact same time. Each one was added to the Constitution in 1791. So all 10 come on at the exact same time. And you probably remember from your U.S. history class that this is the Bill of Rights. This is the Bill of Rights, which was absolutely essential to add to the United States Constitution to guarantee certain protections that all Americans would have under this new national government. So we have our basic freedoms of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. We have a regulated militia, so that we have the right to keep and bear arms. We are protected from housing soldiers. We are protected from unlawful searches and seizures, and we are guaranteed due process rights to a fair trial, jury trials, and civil suits, protection from cruel and unusual punishment. We have enumerated rights beyond those that are simply listed, and we have established reserved powers for the states. These are the original Bill of Rights, all added at the exact same time in 1791. Beyond that, we have 17 more amendments that have been added to the Constitution since 1791. Many of these have something really, really cool in common. Many of these deal with a word, suffrage. Suffrage, of course, means the right to vote. And quite a few of these amendments guaranteed an extension of suffrage to those who were not originally granted suffrage here in the United States. Let's take a look. Amendment 15. The right to vote cannot be denied because of race. Amendment 17. Direct election of senators. The 19th Amendment, granting women's suffrage, the right to vote cannot be denied because of gender. The 23rd Amendment, people in Washington, D.C. have the right to vote for president and vice president, even though they don't have a state. Amendment 24, which outlawed poll taxes, that was an extension of protecting suffrage. And finally, Amendment 26. The right to vote cannot be denied to citizens who are over the age of 18. So if we take a look at the 27 total amendments, 10 we would lump together as the Bill of Rights. And these 6 are then added to extend suffrage and protect our right to vote. Now, it would be fun to point out that 2 of these amendments actually cancel each other out. We have the prohibition of alcohol, which seemed like a really good idea at the time, and then the 21st Amendment, which said, no, we're joking about that, we don't really need that. So, 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights, 6 deal with extending suffrage, 2 amendments cancel each other out. That leaves the remaining, what do we got now, 9 amendments that pretty much have to do with how the government works. How the government works. So, as far as how the government works, we've got a revision of the Electoral College, we have a definition of citizen, and we have congressional use of an income tax. Where am I? We have the lame duck amendment. We have the limiting the president to 2 full terms, which is really, really good sometimes. We also have an amendment that deals with presidential succession, who gets to be president next, and congressional pay. So these are all dealing with how the government works. Of course, I'm leaving out what might be one of the most important amendments, the 13th. Formally abolish slavery in the United States. All right, so all told, all together, we are looking at 27 formal changes to the United States Constitution. But you may ask yourself, how do we change it? As we can read along when we're talking about the amendment process, this is a very difficult process to achieve. However, it is absolutely essential that we have it. Once again, an amendment is a formal change to the document, and it becomes part of the document itself. Amendments to the Constitution are just as powerful as the rest of that original article. All amendments must be proposed at the national level, and it requires a 2/3 vote to advance, and that is a very difficult type of majority to achieve. So if we're taking a look at this, the proposal, which means a suggestion, must come from the national level, either by 2/3 of the members of both the House and the Senate, or at a national convention that is called by 2/3 of the states. So once again, that 2/3 vote is absolutely essential in order for an amendment to even be proposed. Ratification means the formal approval of a document in order for it to go into effect. And you will need to notice that it requires 3/4 of the states to approve an amendment to the Constitution in order for it to become part of that Constitution. Now today the magic number is 38 because 3/4 of 50 states is 38. This can be done by 3/4 of the state legislatures, or it can be done by 3/4 of the ratifying conventions in the states. Now it would be important right here to note that almost all of the amendments, I believe all except for one, have been proposed by 2/3 of Congress and then ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures. That is the most basic and traditional path for changes to be made. Now this amendment process, you'll notice, does reflect federalism. Federalism, that division of power between the national government and the state government. To change the Constitution, it requires national and state activity. This is essential that we be able to change this Constitution so that it can change with the times. Let me say that again. It is absolutely essential that we be able to change this Constitution so that it can adjust with the times. It needs to be firm, so the process is very difficult, but it is very possible. And this allows stability. It allows for the government to continue to operate and continue to work, so not so rigid that it will simply break and not be able to make adjustments. And it's because of Article 5 and the amendment process that the United States government has continued to act since 1789. The final thing we need to discuss is that there are many ways that we can informally change the Constitution on a regular basis. And when we say informal, these are simply adaptations of the U.S. Constitution to how the government needs to work to meet the needs of the people. It is important that the United States Constitution be flexible enough for the government to respond to the needs of the people as situations arise. The articles are vaguely written, which allows for more efficient governing as new situations arise. Congress, through basic legislation, can define its powers and implement programs. And of course, we remember that Congress and its authorities come in Article 1 of the Constitution. The President, through executive agreements and executive orders, which we'll talk about later this year, the President carries out his roles as the chief administrator, the chief executive, and the chief diplomat. And of course, the President and his powers are identified and defined in Article 2 of the Constitution. The courts also regularly interpret what the Constitution means. Through its decisions, the courts interpret the Constitution and the nation's laws, and they are the keepers of the Constitution as they attempt to safeguard Americans and their needs and their protections against the government. As once again, just quick review: Congress, legislative branch, Article 1, the President, executive, Article 2, the Supreme Court and the inferior courts, judicial branch, Article 3. Political parties have also played a big role in explaining how the government will operate, even though, fun fact, political parties are not mentioned at all in the United States Constitution. However, through electoral practices and the occupation of its offices, political parties have shaped congressional organization, they have shaped the rules of debate, they have shaped the way our legislature is organized, and the interactions between Congress and the President. All of these informal changes occur on a daily basis as, once again, the government attempts to be flexible enough to meet the needs of the people as situations arise.